When you speak in English, do you ask enough questions? Are you good at asking questions? Do you lead the conversation? This is why I'm making this video. It's all about how to make more questions and why. So first we'll look at why. Perhaps you have conversation classes, and in my experience in a lot of conversation classes, yes, it can be 50-50. The teacher speaks 50% of the time, the student speaks 50% of the time, and that's a good ratio. Sometimes it can be the student speaking 60% of the time. That is also very good. It's good practice for the student. But when it comes to questions, there's not that balance. In my experience, maybe I ask questions 70% of the time and the student 30% of the time, and sometimes it's even more extreme. I find that I need to push students to ask questions, and this is definitely a weakness, I think, in a lot of students. So perhaps you've got to the conversational level, but you don't ask enough questions. And why ask questions? Well, first of all, you can balance out the conversation. So both sides are asking an equal amount of questions, and that's good. Also, if you ask questions and you're confident in your ability to ask questions, you can lead the conversation. You can guide it to where you want to go. And that's important. Asking questions, especially follow-up questions, can help you solve problems. You can find out specifically what the problem is. And if you're at work, or perhaps it's a family or social situation, if you can ask good follow-up questions, then you can solve problems and people will like you for solving problems. And another advantage of asking questions is that the person you're talking to or the group you're talking to, they feel, in most cases, unless you're asking questions like the police, in most cases, they feel appreciated. They like being asked questions. It makes people feel important. You're asking for their opinion. You're listening to them. So people like to be asked questions, and they like you for doing that. So that's another reason for asking questions. So how can you ask more questions? One simple strategy is to use chunks, because a lot of questions follow very similar patterns. And today we will specifically look at questions, so like questions with actions in them, because they're easy to learn. And once you understand how they work, you can start using them in your conversation. So let's look at some. So here are ask more questions with chunks. Okay, and we got action chunks, and there are 4 actions, just in case this is the first time you're watching one of my videos. So we've got type 1, play football. So we put it as an action. Type 2 is played football, and in this case, it's same as the type 3. And we also use a type 4, playing football. Type 4, dead easy, just put ing on the end of it. Okay, and here we have some chunks. Why learning chunks? Because if you learn a chunk, the chunk contains the grammar. So for instance, there's a chunk, what time do you? It contains the grammar. I teach a lot of Dutch people, a lot of some German people, and when they ask questions, if they're at a lower level, what often happens is that they ask a question with, what time go you to work? What time get you up? Because that's how questions are asked in Dutch and German. But in English, we put do into the question. So what time do you? And then if you add the action afterwards, what time do you get up? What time do you go to work? So it makes your questions much clearer, especially if you're speaking to a native speaker. Okay, so there's a few examples of what time do you? How should you? So what is the right way to do something? How should you ride a bike? How should you drive in the city? How should you prepare curry? So there's some examples. When was the last time you? So this one takes a type 2. When was the last time you brushed your teeth? When was the last time you drove your car? When was the last time you went on holiday? Did you plus type 1. So did you tells us it's about the past. Well, we use a type 1 after it. So in English, we have this pattern of past, type 1. There are some examples. Did you go to work yesterday? Did you see your parents last weekend? Did you work in the garden? And how often do you? Takes the type 1. So how often do you go swimming? How often do you practice English? I hope it's every day. So we've got do you, after do you, always a type 1. Do you, does she, type 1. So do you play football? Do you read books? Do you watch the TV? Very simple. But it's a simple way to practice. You know, there's a type 1 after do you. You can make up hundreds of questions. The next one, were you at a specific time in the past? So here we got at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. So it's a specific time in the past. Were you watching TV at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon? Any type 4 you can fit into this slot. Were you playing basketball at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon? Should you, and this you can add a type 1 to it. Should you eat healthy food? Should you go to the gym? Should you drive slower in the city? These are questions, asking, is this the right thing to do? And when you were young, did you? So notice this is about the past, but we use this type 1 to add an action to it. So when you were young, did you play football? When you were young, did you study hard in school? All right, could you? Could you plus type 1? This is probably asking about things you're capable of doing in the future. Probably. Anyway, could you climb over that fence? Could you sing in a choir? Could you run 5 kilometers? What are the advantages and disadvantages of? If we put an action behind it, then we need a type 4. And here it's because of. So after a preposition, you can put this type 4. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of reading books? What are the advantages and disadvantages of taking the train? What are the advantages and disadvantages of working remotely? Okay, when you were young, did you? Okay, again, we've got past. This is about the past. But here we add a type 1 action. So when you were young, did you go swimming? When you were young, did you like school? When you were young, did you play with your friends outside? And did you used to? Again, this is about the past. So did you used to do a lot of sports? Did you used to study hard? Did you used to go to the gym? Okay, so this is one way to ask more questions. Think in chunks. If you look at questions, get into the habit of looking at it and thinking, oh, how can I play around with it? What bits can remain and what bits can I change? So today we basically looked at actions that you can add to a question. Not all questions are like this. We can do more questions, but I thought this is a useful starting point because you can make lots of different types of questions and start to get comfortable asking questions. Asking questions is very important and it will change how you interact in English. It will allow you to lead conversations. It will allow you to guide the conversation. It will allow you to do so much more. So get better at questions and start by playing around with them and spotting what the chunks are and how you can vary them. So there will be more on this at a later date. So if you like the video, please like and subscribe if you haven't already.